When we think of pirates, we picture the roaring seas, the clash of cutlasses, and the glitter of stolen gold. But for all their daring and danger, even pirates needed a place to come ashore, to rest their weary bodies, to spend their hard-won plunder, and to drink themselves into oblivion. That place, more than any other, was the tavern. For the pirate, the tavern was not simply a drinking house. It was a refuge, a sanctuary, a place where the walls seemed to shut out the endless horizon of the sea, where the ceaseless roll of the waves was replaced by the rattle of dice, the clink of mugs, and the hum of rough music. It was, in many ways, the pirates' second home, the only home many of them ever truly had. Picture it, a port town in the Caribbean or along the American coast, the humid air thick with the smell of tar, fish, and salt. Ships bobbing lazily at anchor, their sails furled, their decks quiet for once. And somewhere in the tangled streets of the harbor, down crooked lanes lit by oil lamps, you find it. A tavern with its door ajar, spilling laughter and shouting into the night. Inside, smoke curls thick from clay pipes. Lanterns swing on rusted chains. Shadows dance on walls lined with cracked timbers, stained by years of spilled ale and blood. For pirates, this was not just about drink. It was about escape. Life at sea was brutal, cold, wet, hungry, and dangerous. Death lurked in every storm, every battle, every misstep on a slick deck. But inside a tavern, there was warmth, there was company. There was the illusion, however fleeting, that one might forget the dangers of tomorrow and simply live for the night. The tavern was also where identity was forged. On board a ship, rank and discipline kept order. The captain gave commands, the quartermaster enforced rules, and the crew obeyed. But in the tavern, all that fell away. Here, pirates could boast of their deeds, recount battles in loud voices, and carve their legends into the memory of those around them. A man who was quiet and obedient on deck might transform into a braggart at the tavern table, waving his arms wildly as he told tales of ships taken, treasures found, or enemies slain. In that smoky haze, reputations were made and destroyed. And yet, it was not all joy. The tavern could be a dangerous place, perhaps more dangerous than the open sea. Too much drink loosened tongues, and with rum came reckless words. Boasts turned to insults, insults to quarrels, and quarrels to fights. Pistols were drawn over spilled ale. Cutlasses flashed over a game of dice. The same place that offered sanctuary could just as easily become a death trap. Many a pirate who survived years at sea met his end not in battle, but in the blood-soaked floor of a tavern. Still, the draw was irresistible. Pirates were, at their core, men, and sometimes women, starved of comfort. They lived in cramped hammocks, ate rotten food, and drank stale water. They slept with the knowledge that death could come in a cannon blast or a slip from the rigging. So when the anchor dropped and they found themselves ashore, the tavern called to them like a beacon. It promised rum, food, women, laughter, music, all the things denied them at sea. It was a place where they could feel human again, even if only for a night. There were taverns everywhere pirates went, from Port Royal in Jamaica to Tortuga in Hispaniola, from Nassau in the Bahamas to Charleston in the American colonies. Each had its own character, its own reputation. Some were little more than shacks with barrels of rum. Others were sprawling halls where merchants, smugglers, and pirates mingled in a haze of smoke and gold. But all of them shared one thing. They were places of refuge for men who lived without peace. And for the cabin boys and young sailors who slipped inside, these taverns were like another world. Here they saw the pirates at their most human, laughing, singing, boasting, weeping, fighting. They learned that even the fiercest of captains had weaknesses, that even the boldest marauder could be humbled by drink. For the young and impressionable, the tavern was both thrilling and terrifying, a place where legends became flesh. The tavern was also a place of ritual. Pirates had traditions for drinking, for toasting, for celebrating victories and mourning losses. The clinking of mugs might be followed by solemn words for the dead, or raucous songs that echoed into the streets. A pirate might spend his last coin on rum rather than save it, because tomorrow was never guaranteed. And in that spirit, the tavern became the ultimate stage for the pirate's philosophy. Live for the moment, for tomorrow may never come. So, when we think of the pirate tavern, we must strip away the fantasy of cozy inns with roaring hearths. These were not places of comfort in the way we imagine today. They were rough, smoky, dangerous, and alive with energy. They were places where the sea's most desperate and daring men came together to remind themselves that they were still alive. For in truth, the pirate tavern was not about the drink. It was about survival, not of the body, but of the spirit. It was the one place where men who lived like shadows on the sea could step into the light, if only for a brief, blazing moment before returning to the endless horizon. Push the door and feel it give beneath your palm, wood swollen with sea air and stained by 100 spilled nights. The hinges complain in a voice that matches the harbour, rusted, weary, familiar, and a breath of warm, smoky air spills out to meet you, thick with the perfume of rum and sweat, tar and fish, pipe smoke and roasted salt meat. You've crossed only a plank's breadth, and already the sea seems far away. The roll of the deck is replaced by another rhythm, mugs striking tabletops, dice clattering like sleet on wood, a fiddle stitching a crooked melody through the haze. The light inside is not so much light as memory of it. Lanterns hang from iron hooks sunk into low blackened beams, flames cradled in glass, smoky as old amber. Every flame flickers with draughts sneaking through warped shutters, making the shadows lift and settle like breathing things. The ceiling is low enough that the taller men stoop without noticing. They've learned to bend to the place that feeds them. Rope-wrapped posts hold up the room, their hemp polished by hands and shoulders, and the occasional affectionate headbutt from a man too far gone in his cup. Underfoot, the floor is a story written in stains. Rum, ale, grease, and the salt tears of the sea. Sand or sawdust has been tossed to keep boots from slipping. It grits softly beneath your step. A stray dog sleeps in a warm crescent near the hearth, one eye half open. A cat, lean and expert, prowls the rafters, hunting the same mice that haunt the holds of ships. The tavern lives by truce with its creatures. Everyone eats who can. Listen. At first you hear noise, the whole room speaking at once. Then your ear untangles the threads. A dozen languages and twice as many accents. English, French, Spanish, Dutch. The Creoles of the islands. The sing-song of West African tongues braided with sailors' slang. Laughter barrels up from a table where men slap shoulders as if trying to drive the bones back in. A quarrel smoulders at another, voices low and sharp as knife edges. Near the door, a pair of merchants whisper to a man who never removes his gloves. At the back, a sailor with a voice like oak smoke starts a shanty, and the chorus rises crooked and true, the melody carried on rum and memory. Along one wall stretches the heart of the place, a plank counter burnished to a muddy shine. Behind it a procession of casks, stacked and chocked, their chalked marks promising everything and nothing, rum, ale, wine, something scratched like GRO, then smeared by a careless sleeve. The tavern keeper stands there like a pilot at the helm, sleeves rolled to the scar, hair tied back with twine, eyes counting coin faster than his hands pour. He moves with a butcher's efficiency, spile out, measure, splash, shove. One for the fiddler, one for the men on credit who will not pay, one for the captain who never counts. A battered tin measure knocks the rim of a clay mug. Sound travels clean through the smoke and registers as hope in a thirsty throat. Watch the serving girls, barmaids, some barely out of childhood, some with faces carved by worry into something like dignity. Aprons stained, hair pinned and losing the argument, they wade the currents between tables with the grace of small boats in a crowded anchorage. They carry trays heavy with mugs and trenchers, learn to anticipate grasping hands and clumsy feet, learn to laugh when it oils the gears, and to freeze when laughter would cost them. Each knows by heart which corner stays civilized, and which sours with the second jug, where the knife thrower practices at the post, and where the captain prefers an empty chair behind his back. The walls are a museum built by accident. A cracked ship's bell hangs from a beam, its tongue tied because someone swore it called in the magistrate when rung after midnight. A tattered ensign, no one asks from which ship, serves as curtain over a doorway that leads to a back room where the business of the sea changes hands. There's a pair of scrimshawed bones, a rusted cutlass with notches too honest to be decoration, a corked bottle with sand from a place the owner insists was El Dorado. Every object is proof of something, a voyage survived, a lie told well enough to stand. You notice the rules only after you've broken one. A slate near the bar reads, in a chalk hand that fights the humidity, "No loaded pistols in the room. Pay as you drink. No steel drawn unless invited." The last line is either a joke or a promise. Below it another, written smaller. Credit is a sail in a dead calm. Someone has underlined it twice. Food drifts through in waves of smell rather than procession. A pot of stew that could be goat or could be story. Onions sweetening in fat. Fish charred and bright with salt. Loaves whose crumb tastes of smoke. A wheel of cheese sweating under the heat and attention. Men eat with the concentration of those who know the ship's biscuit waits for them tomorrow. Elbows claim territory. Knives serve as both silver and punctuation. Not every corner welcomes the eye. Some tables cultivate shadow, a deliberate hush around them even as the room roars. Here captains calculate. Quartermasters measure memory against coin. Smugglers tilt maps to catch a lantern's slice of light. Hands cover lips, while other hands slide folded notes across sticky wood. The tavern keeps these secrets the way a reef keeps shipwrecks. It cannot help but gather them. And yet, for all the caution, the room is warmer than any ship's berth. There's a kind of fellowship in the ruin. Dice tumble from a palm and spin like planets, then die against a pewter mug. Groans and cheers rising like a tide. A thin boy with a fiddle saws something lively and nearly keeps up. The drum is a tabletop, the whistle a bottleneck, and the floor becomes the deck. Boots stamping time, while men forget for a minute the sway of real water. A man with coal for teeth tells a joke too filthy to repeat. The table roars. For a heartbeat, he is king of a country that dissolves with the next round. Look up to the loft. A crooked staircase, a railing repaired with rope, and a row of narrow doors that do not quite close. A lamp burns outside each, wick turned low to save oil. The rooms beyond are not romances. They are beds with mattresses that sigh under their history, places to sleep or pretend to. A woman disappears into one with a sailor who has already forgotten his name. A man collapses across another door and snores like distant surf. Someone prays behind a third, voice small and fierce, bargaining in the universal language of mornings after. By the hearth, a chair sits empty, as if reserved for a ghost. Men nod to it without meaning to. They all know someone who should be there and is not. Lost to a broadside, a fever, a rope. The tavern remembers better than any church. Its liturgy is spoken in stories that improve with every telling. Step back for a moment and take the whole. The lanterns breathing, the smoke softening edges, the casks like squat sentries, the tables as islands, the corridor of floor between them, a channel navigated by those who know its shoals. Smell the rum, molasses dark, a sweetness that means oblivion. Hear the coins clink, the dice decide, the song find its chorus, the laugh split into a shout, and then mend itself again. This is a harbour within a harbour, a place where men who float for a living finally feel weight beneath their feet. You understand, standing there with the door at your back and the night pressing beyond it. This is why they come. Not merely to drink, though they drink with dedication, but to be held by walls that do not move and faces that do, to feel the heat of breath and bodies, and the relief of being more than a shadow on a watchbill. The tavern is a ship moored in land's idea of safety, and for a few bright, smoky hours, the sea loosens its grip. Tomorrow, the anchor will rise. But tonight, the lanterns burn, and the room inhales and exhales, and the rum travels from throat to heart, easy as tide. If the tavern was the pirate's refuge, rum was its blood. It soaked the floors, coloured the laughter, sharpened quarrels into duels, and dulled pain into sleep. No drink on earth had such power over men who spent their lives under the lash of salt and storm. Rum was not simply alcohol, it was currency, it was medicine, it was ritual, and in the pirate tavern, it was the one thing no man refused. Rum's reign began with geography. Sugar plantations spread across the Caribbean like wildfire, their cane fields swaying under the sun. Molasses, the sticky byproduct of sugar refining, piled up faster than it could be shipped. Distillers learned to coax from it a liquor both cheap and strong, and the sailors of every nation learned to crave it. Where merchants sipped brandy and nobles toasted with wine, the sea gave its children rum, harsh, fiery, and sweet, with the memory of cane fields. Step into a pirate tavern and watch how it rules. Behind the bar, casks lean like old men, their staves blackened with seepage. A plug is hammered out, and the tavern keeper's measure dips in with the ease of long habit. The rum pours thick and golden brown, catching the lamplight like molten amber. In a battered clay mug, it smokes with strength before the first sip even rises. No pirate ever asked what proof it was. They judged by how quickly it burned. A first swallow seared the throat like cannon smoke, eyes watering, chest tightening. The second warmed the blood, loosening shoulders and tongues. By the third, the room swayed like a deck in swell, and the tavern was transformed into something larger than its walls. Rum made men bold, foolish, loud, brave, cruel. It was liquid transformation, and every pirate knew its script. Of course, not all rum was equal. The best was aged in casks that mellowed its fire and lent it whispers of oak. The worst came raw from back-alley stills, sharp enough to strip paint. Tavern keepers stretched it further still, watering it down or mixing it with spices and sugar to disguise its bite. Some added a splash of lime, learned from the Navy's grog ration. Others mixed it with water alone, a drink both despised and beloved. Grog, the sailor's daily bread. Pirates mocked it, but drank it all the same. Rum did more than intoxicate. It knit the crew together. A round poured meant camaraderie, an invitation to share in a fleeting moment of warmth before the sea reclaimed its due. Pirates toasted victories and mourned the dead with the same mug. They drank to luck, to the devil, to the next sunrise. They christened new ships with rum, not wine, smashing bottles across their bows as if baptizing them into sin. There were rituals, too, half superstitious, half sincere. Some crews poured the first sip onto the floor for the drowned, a libation to the sea that owned them all. Others swore by the rum ration, doling it out in careful measures to keep men both loyal and pliable. A pirate denied his drink was a powder keg waiting for spark. Wise captains knew that rum was as much a tool of command as cutlass or pistol. But for all its fellowship, rum carried shadows. Pirates drank not only for joy, but for oblivion. Rum dulled hunger when food ran thin. It softened wounds when no surgeon could be found. It banished fear before a boarding action, lent courage where none lived. Yet it also hollowed men from the inside. Teeth blackened, bellies swelled, livers failed, hands shook. In the tavern's smoky light, You might see a man raise his mug in a cheer tonight and lie cold in his hammock a week later, undone by the same fire that gave him courage. And rum was dangerous not only to the body, but to the room itself. Too much drink was tinder in a place already thick with tempers. A laugh turned into a challenge, a boast into an insult. Dice slammed to the table, cards ripped in half, mugs shattered into shards. More than one tavern was half destroyed in a drunken brawl, the fight spilling into the street while the rum kept burning in the blood. Yet still, men returned to it. They would spend their last coin on a mug rather than save it for tomorrow's bread. They would stagger into dawn with the taste of molasses and smoke still on their lips, swearing off the drink even as they begged the keeper for just one more. Because for pirates, tomorrow was not promised. The sea might claim them, the gallows might await them, or their own shipmates might turn against them. And so the philosophy of rum was the philosophy of piracy itself. Live now, because tomorrow may never come. Listen as the tavern roars. Mugs clink in uneven harmony. A man toasts loudly to fortune, another to damnation, a third to the girl he left in Port Royal, or Tortuga, or Kingston, names blurring into the fog of memory. A fiddler strikes a new tune, the floor vibrates under stomping boots, and the rum loosens every voice until the walls themselves seem to sing. And if you look closely at the boy in the corner, the cabin boy, the runaway, the youth barely old enough to grow a beard, you'll see rum's shadow in his eyes too. He watches the older men drink and imagines himself brave, fierce, unstoppable. He does not yet know that the same fire can consume him. For now, it is the taste of belonging. Rum was the pirate's king, his poison, his prayer. It was both the promise of escape and the trap that bound him tighter to his fate. In the tavern, it ruled without challenge. Every song, every story, every fight, every tear had rum at its root. And so, when the night grows long and the lanterns burn low, the tavern does not quiet. It drinks deeper. Because rum is not only what pirates drank, it was what they lived by, and often what they died by. For all the oceans they crossed and all the treasures they stole, pirates were men who lived in hunger. A ship at sea was a prison of salt beef, hardtack crawling with weevils, dried peas, and brackish water. Meals were not occasions, but chores. Food was fuel, often barely edible, sometimes dangerous. Which is why, when pirates stumbled into a tavern after months at sea, their appetites were as fierce as their thirst. The tavern was not known for its cuisine, but for pirates it might as well have been a king's banquet. Imagine walking in with a stomach shriveled by weeks of rotten biscuits and salted pork so tough it bent knives. Suddenly, the air smells of roasting meat, frying onions, bread warm from the hearth. It was like a miracle, even if the miracle was rough, greasy, and questionable in its origins. What did pirates eat in these taverns? The answer depended on the port, the season, and the creativity of the cook. In the Caribbean, there was always fish. Whole catches fried in pans black with years of use, or grilled directly over flames until skin crackled. Sometimes stewed with peppers, onions, and garlic, if such luxuries could be found. Pork was common too, salted, smoked, or roasted on a spit, dripping fat onto the fire. Chickens squawked in the back rooms, destined for the pot, while goats, the sailors' eternal companions, often provided both meat and milk for a hearty stew. Bread was a treasure in itself, not the rock-hard biscuits of the sea, but loaves baked fresh, their crusts blistered, their insides soft enough to tear with the hands. Pirates tore into them eagerly, sopping up gravies and stews, stuffing them with cheese or salted fish. Cheese was another delight. Pungent wheels brought from Europe, sweating in the heat, or crumbly goat cheese made in the islands. Even when sour, it was welcome after months of deprivation. Then there were the stews, the tavern's great equalizer. Every pot was a gamble, chunks of meat, roots, beans, and herbs simmering until the flavors merged into a thick, savory haze. No one asked too closely what went in. Sometimes goat, sometimes pig, sometimes something less clear. But after months at sea, no pirate cared. They spooned it down with grins, mouths burning from pepper and rum, bellies swelling at last with food that felt alive. Of course, not all was abundance. Taverns fed who they could with what they had. Some nights the meal was little more than dried fish boiled in brine, or stale bread softened in ale. Rats sometimes found their way into stews, not by mistake but by necessity. Pirates were not delicate men. They ate what filled the belly and kept them upright. The smell of frying, the sound of bones cracking, the sight of grease shining on a table, these were the signs of comfort. Food was part of the spectacle. A whole pig turning on a spit in the center of a tavern was as much theatre as meal. Men gathered around, mugs in hand, cheering when the skin split with fat and crackle. A fiddler played faster, the tavern keeper carved slices with a flourish, and greasy fingers tore meat from the bone as laughter filled the smoke. For one night they dined like kings, and it mattered little that tomorrow they would return to salt pork and biscuit. But the tavern meal was not only about eating, it was about fellowship. A loaf was shared between shipmates, each tearing pieces with their hands. A bowl of stew passed around the table became a bond, a reminder that hunger was survived together. Pirates raised mugs not only in toasts, but in thanks for full bellies, for the chance to taste something beyond the endless sameness of sea rations. And yet, for all the joy, tavern food carried dangers. Spoilage was constant in hot climates, and meat often reeked before it was cooked. Flies swarmed the kitchens, knives were seldom clean, and water was as suspect ashore as at sea. A pirate might wake from a night of feasting, not with fond memories, but with stomach cramps, fever, or worse. The tavern meal, like everything in pirate life, was a gamble. Still, the attraction was undeniable. The poorest pirate, with only a handful of coins, would spend them on something hot and greasy rather than save for tomorrow. They ate with urgency, as though trying to make up for months of deprivation in a single night. And in some ways, they were. Food was not just nourishment. It was proof they had survived long enough to taste it. Listen closely, and you will hear it. The crack of bread crust, the clatter of knives on wood, the slurp of stew, the grunt of satisfaction when a man finds meat instead of bone in his portion. Around the tables, pirates lick their fingers, pound the boards in approval, or curse when their share falls short. The tavern becomes a chorus, not just of voices, but of appetites, a celebration of survival disguised as a meal. For the tavern keeper, food was as important as rum. It kept men seated longer, kept them ordering drink, kept them coming back. A clever host stretched stew with beans, padded pies with roots, roasted bones until they gave their last ounce of flavor. Every meal was both hospitality and business. And so, though it was greasy, rough, and sometimes dangerous, the tavern meal was one of the pirate's greatest pleasures. In the candlelight, with a mug in one hand and a hunk of bread in the other, a man could forget the salt pork and maggoty biscuit of his ship. He could pretend, for a brief while, that he was not a hunted thief of the sea, but simply a man at table, fed and full. For pirates, food was not luxury. It was survival, wrapped in grease and laughter. And in the tavern, it became a feast, however humble, that tasted of freedom. A pirate tavern without music was no tavern at all. The air might have been heavy with smoke and rum, the tables slick with grease, but it was the sound of fiddles, drums, and rough voices that gave the place its heartbeat. After months of nothing but the creak of rigging and the crash of waves, pirates hungered for noise the way starving men hunger for bread. And in the tavern, noise was life. Picture it. the fiddler in the corner, his bow worn to threads, scraping out a reel that swirls above the crowd like smoke. His instrument might be cracked, patched with glue, but his fingers fly with desperate joy. A man with a drum, perhaps no more than a barrel top, beats out a rhythm that sets mugs shaking. Another blows on a tin whistle, high and sharp as gull cries. Together they weave a net of sound that catches every ear in the room. Soon enough, boots begin to pound the floor. Pirates stamp in time, slamming their heels against the boards until the whole tavern seems to sway with the beat. Hands clap, voices roar, and a song rises that every sailor knows. The verses change from port to port, but the chorus remains the same, loud, raucous, and fit to shake the rafters. The songs themselves are stories, shanties about storms weathered, women wooed, and captains mocked. Some are bawdy enough to make even the boldest blush. Others are haunting, drawn from West African traditions or Celtic laments, carrying sorrow through smoke and rum. A single voice might start soft, only to be swallowed by the chorus of 50 throats, each man determined to sing louder than his neighbor. But music was only part of the entertainment. Taverns were arenas, and games were the battles. Dice clattered across tables worn smooth by years of wagers. Bones tumbled, coins slid, and fortunes changed in an instant. Pirates shouted with joy at a winning throw, cursed with equal passion when the dice betrayed them. Some swore oaths to luck itself, promising their share of the next raid, if only fortune would smile. Cards dealt their own stories. Rough packs, smudged with grease and sweat, passed between calloused hands. Games of chance and strategy both unfolded under the dim lanterns. A good hand brought cheers, a bad one brought accusations of cheating, and accusations brought knives. More than one game ended with blood staining the cards, the loser sprawled across the table. Still, the games continued. No pirate could resist the lure of a wager. There were other contests too, more physical, more immediate. Arm wrestling bouts that left knuckles white and veins bulging. Drinking contests that ended with men sprawled on the floor, snoring in puddles of rum. Knife throwing at scarred wooden posts, the blades flashing in lamplight, sometimes striking true, sometimes missing to the laughter of the crowd. Even simple challenges. Who could down a mug fastest? Who could balance longest on a chair? Turned into spectacles that drew cheers and jeers alike. And always the crowd pressed in, eager to watch, eager to bet, eager to join. Pirates were men who thrived on competition, who lived every day in risk and chance. The tavern was simply another stage for their daring. Yet with every game and every song came danger. A laugh too loud at the wrong moment, a hand too slow to pull back from a pile of coins, a boast taken as an insult. These could spark chaos. A man cheated at dice might overturn the table. A drunk shoved aside in song might swing a fist, and fists quickly gave way to steel. The line between play and violence was as thin as the edge of a blade. Still, the mayhem was part of the attraction. The tavern was alive, unpredictable, as dangerous and exhilarating as the sea itself. For pirates, who lived in constant readiness for battle, the chaos of the tavern was almost comforting. It was familiar ground, risk, reward, danger, and survival. Only here, the stakes were not treasure or death at sea, but the pride of an evening's victory or the shame of a night's defeat. Not every contest was violent. Some pirates found joy in quieter games. Riddles passed around like mugs of rum, tales told with dramatic flair, boasting matches where the goal was to outdo each other with ever more outrageous stories. A man might claim he had wrestled a shark, or seduced a governor's wife, or escaped a noose by biting through the rope. The truth mattered little. What mattered was the laughter, the applause, the momentary crown of being the night's greatest liar. For the youngest among them, the boys who had never known a tavern before, this was bewildering and intoxicating. They watched their elders gamble, drink, and sing, learning what it meant to be part of this rough brotherhood. They learned that a tavern was not only a place to eat and drink, but a crucible where reputations were forged. One brave or foolish deed in the heat of a game could elevate a man's standing for weeks. One cowardly retreat could mark him forever. And through it all, the tavern keeper kept watch. He poured drinks, swept coins into his strongbox, and stepped in only when the mayhem threatened his livelihood. He knew how to calm tempers, when to shout, when to stay silent. He had seen it all before, the brawls, the songs, the victories and defeats. To him, it was not mayhem, but business. And business was good. So the night roared on. Fiddles wailed, dice rattled, knives flew, mugs clinked, and laughter rang loud enough to carry into the streets. The tavern became a storm in its own right, chaotic, thrilling, alive. For the pirates who filled it, this was life distilled, danger, risk, fellowship, and fleeting joy. And as dawn crept closer, as some men slumped unconscious and others still pounded their mugs in rhythm to the music, one truth became clear. The tavern was not simply a place to pass the time. It was the stage where pirates lived out their own legend, one night at a time, with music, games, and mayhem as their script. Step into any pirate tavern, and you'll notice at once, it was not just a world of men. Women moved through the haze of smoke and rum, shaping the rhythm of the night as much as the fiddler's bow or the dice's roll. Their presence was complicated, welcomed, exploited, feared, admired, but it was undeniable. To understand tavern life, you had to understand the women who worked within it. Most were serving girls, barmaids whose lives were spent balancing trays and dodging hands. They carried mugs through seas of men, skirts swaying, eyes sharp. Each learned quickly how to survive in such company. A soft laugh could coax more coin, but a hard glare could silence a man quicker than any captain's order. These women became part of the tavern's fabric, as essential as the rum casks and lanterns. Their work was endless. From dusk until dawn, they moved between tables, filling mugs, delivering trenchers of stew, and keeping track of who had paid and who had not. They dodged drunken arms, sidestepped brawls, and learned when to smile and when to vanish into shadow. A serving girl's survival was as much about reading men as carrying trays. She knew which sailor would tip generously, which would grow mean with drink, which would offer promises he could never keep. Some were more than barmaids. Many taverns doubled as brothels, their back rooms lined with narrow beds and guarded doors. Here, women sold not only drinks but company, temporary comfort in lives marked by loneliness and danger. To the pirates, who spent months surrounded by nothing but men and sea, such companionship was as sought after as rum itself. But the lives of these women were rarely easy. Some chose the work because it offered coin and protection in a dangerous port. Others were forced by poverty, debt, or coercion. They bore the risks of disease, violence, and abandonment, their survival dependent on wits, luck, and the goodwill of tavern keepers who treated them as both employees and property. And yet, for all the hardship, they wielded power of a kind. A clever woman could guide the flow of drink, smooth tempers before they turned deadly, or encourage a quarrel if it suited her purpose. She could gather secrets whispered in her ear, pass them to the right man, and earn her place as more than just a barmaid. Some became informants, spies, or even partners in piracy. A whispered warning from a woman in a tavern might mean the difference between capture and escape. There were also women who broke the mold entirely. Some pirates' wives or lovers followed them ashore, running taverns of their own. A few even sailed alongside their men, legends like Anne Bonny and Mary Read, proving that the line between tavern and ship was not so solid after all. For every nameless serving girl, there were women who seized opportunity in the chaos and carved out their own authority. In the tavern, Women were often the pivot around which nights turned. A smile might lift the room. A rejection might spark a fight. The sound of their laughter mixed with the rumble of male voices, a note that cut through smoke and fiddle alike. Sometimes they joined the songs, voices bright and sure, leading choruses that men bellowed in reply. Other times they vanished into the crowd, unseen but never unimportant. Pirates themselves saw these women with a mix of desire and respect, affection and exploitation. To some, they were saints who offered comfort. To others, they were prey. And in the middle of it all, women learned to survive, to turn the chaos of the tavern into a kind of shield. Not every woman in the tavern sold drinks or flesh. Some were wives or widows running the business itself. Others were cooks, musicians, or laundresses. Children darted among the legs of drinkers, daughters of serving women, already learning the unspoken rules. For them, the tavern was home as well as workplace, its smoke and noise as familiar as lullabies. But perhaps the most striking thing about women in pirate taverns was how they embodied the contradictions of piracy itself. They lived lives of danger and hardship, yet also found moments of freedom and influence. They were exploited, yet could not be dismissed. Their presence shaped the tavern's identity, making it more than just a den of drunken men. Listen closely in the tavern's roar, and you'll hear their voices. A barmaid calls for silence as she balances 6 mugs at once. A woman laughs at a sailor's boast, the sound carrying over dice and song. In the back room, a softer voice bargains for coin, for terms, for a chance to survive another day. These sounds are as much a part of the pirate tavern as the clink of mugs or the scrape of fiddle strings. For all the romantic myths painted later, the truth was rawer, harsher. Women in pirate taverns were survivors above all. Their lives were lived at the edge of danger, and yet, in that danger, they carved out space for themselves. They fed the pirates, served them, sometimes loved them, sometimes betrayed them, and always endured them. And so, when we picture the pirate tavern, we must picture them too. Skirts brushing sawdust floors, faces lit by lantern glow, voices rising above the storm of noise. Without them, the tavern would have been only half alive. With them, it became what it truly was, a place of chaos, comfort, sin, and survival, where every player, man or woman, fought to make it through the night. If music gave the tavern its heartbeat, and rum gave it blood, then fights gave it teeth. No pirate tavern was complete without the sudden crash of a table overturned, the smack of fists on flesh, or the ring of steel drawn in anger. Violence was as much a part of tavern life as laughter or song, inevitable, expected, and in its way, celebrated. Pirates lived on the edge of danger, and their tempers burned as quick as powder. Months at sea packed into cramped quarters, storms survived by inches, captains obeyed under pain of death. These pressures forged men taut as bowstrings. In the tavern, rum loosened their knots, and when one string snapped, the whole room might reverberate. The spark could be anything: a dice game lost and suspected of cheating, a boast taken as insult, a barmaid's smile claimed by 2 men at once. Even a careless elbow jostling a mug could ignite fury. Words sharpened, laughter soured, and suddenly fists were flying. At first it might be just that: bare fists, pirates grappling and swinging while the crowd roared approval. Tables cleared, mugs snatched out of harm's way, coins scooped up by opportunists while the fighters rolled across the floor. A good tavern fight was almost entertainment, the audience shouting wagers, cheering favourites, jeering losers. But pirates were seldom content with fists alone. Knives flashed, bottles shattered into jagged weapons, stools swung like clubs. Some drew pistols, though few dared fire in such close quarters. Gunpowder smoke filled the air thick enough already, and a misfire could set the place ablaze. Still, the threat of steel raised the stakes, and brawls that began with laughter often ended with blood. Tavern keepers knew the script well. They let the first blows play out, watching with a weary eye. But when knives appeared or furniture splintered, they bellowed for order. Some wielded cudgels themselves, breaking up fights with a crack across the skull. Others unleashed loyal bruisers to throw offenders into the street. A few cared less for peace than for payment. So long as the fighters kept drinking, the fight could rage until dawn. The crowd fed the chaos. Pirates were gamblers by nature, and fights became another wager. Bets flew as punches landed, coins changing hands faster than cards in a dealer's grip. Some urged restraint, pulling mates away before blood spilled. Others egged it on, shouting challenges of their own, eager to turn one quarrel into a melee. And once a fight spread, it was like fire leaping from rig to rig, a tavern transformed into a battlefield. For the women of the tavern, fights were both danger and opportunity. Barmaids dodged flying mugs and ducked behind barrels, cursing the men who ruined their night's earnings. Yet some used the distraction to slip a hand into purses or to escape unwanted company. In the back rooms, doors were bolted until the storm blew over. To outsiders, sober sailors, merchants, or unlucky travelers, a pirate brawl was sheer madness. They saw only chaos, men smashing bottles over each other's heads, rolling in sawdust and blood, laughter and screams mingling until the line between fun and fury vanished. To the pirates themselves, though, it was almost ritual. Fighting was a way to bleed off rage, to settle grudges, to prove strength. In the strange logic of tavern life, a man who fought well might leave with more respect than he entered with, even if his face was swollen and his lips split. Some feuds ran deeper. A crewman wronged on one voyage might wait months to confront his enemy ashore. In the tavern at last, vengeance was taken. These fights were darker, more deliberate, less sport than execution. Blades flashed quick, and the laughter of the crowd fell silent as men realized death, not amusement, was at stake. Blood spilled on tavern floors became stains that lingered for weeks. Reminders of grudges settled the pirate way. Yet, for all the violence, most brawls ended as quickly as they began. A man knocked senseless, another dragged away by shipmates, a round of drinks poured to cool tempers. The tavern returned to its rhythm, music picking up where it had left off, laughter louder now as if to erase the memory of danger. For pirates, fighting was simply part of the night, no more remarkable than song or dice. Still, the scars lingered. Broken tables, shattered mugs, bloodstains soaking into the floorboards. These were as much a part of the tavern's decoration as its lanterns and barrels. A seasoned tavern-goer knew where to sit to avoid flying bottles, which corners offered escape, and which stools doubled as weapons when tempers flared. In the end, the tavern brawl reflected pirate life itself, chaotic, violent, thrilling, and brief. Men who might die tomorrow at sea or on the gallows lived tonight with fists raised and knives drawn, laughing even as they bled. And when dawn came, they would drink again together, their grudges forgotten, or at least postponed until the next mug spilled, the next insult landed, the next dice betrayed. So when you imagine the pirate tavern, do not picture only music and merriment. Picture the sudden silence when dice scatter across the floor, the rising roar of a crowd as a fist lands, the crash of a chair breaking, the flash of steel in lamplight. Picture mayhem breaking loose like a storm at sea, inevitable and wild. Because in the tavern, as on the ocean, violence was never far away. It was simply waiting for its cue. Amid the thunder of music, the clatter of dice, and the crash of fists, there was another life in the pirate tavern, quieter, but no less important. It lurked in corners where the lantern light failed, in booths where curtains sagged, and in whispers drowned out by fiddle and drum. The tavern was not only a place of drink and mayhem, it was a marketplace of secrets, where alliances were forged, betrayals hatched, and fortunes decided with the slip of a coin or a nod across the room. Pirates did not trust courts or contracts. Their world was built on handshakes, on oaths made over mugs of rum, on promises sealed in the dark. And the tavern, with its thick walls and louder patrons, was the perfect cover for such business. If you wanted to hire a crew, buy stolen goods, or arrange a raid, you didn't go to the docks. You went to the tavern. Step into the shadows, and you might see it. Two captains bent close over a table, voices hushed, though their eyes burn with ambition. A map lies between them, stained with grease and ale, its edges curling in the heat. Fingers jab at coasts, at harbours, at merchant routes where prey might be found. A deal is struck not with parchment, but with a clink of mugs. Tomorrow, ships will sail on the strength of tonight's whispers. Elsewhere, smugglers and merchants gather. One slides a pouch across the table, heavy with coins that glint in the dim light. Another pushes back a parcel wrapped in cloth, silks from the East, tobacco from the Americas, spices smuggled past the customs men. The tavern is the beating heart of this black market, its walls holding more contraband than a governor's warehouse. Spies, too, haunt these corners. Men in plain coats, their manner too neat, too cautious, feign disinterest while their ears strain for names and places. Some work for governors, others for rival pirates. A careless boast shouted over music might mean a hanging noose weeks later. Yet the tavern's chaos was protection as much as risk. To vanish into noise was easy, and so the dance of deception continued. Even recruitment happened here. A captain in need of men planted himself at a central table, buying rounds, boasting of treasure, promising shares rich enough to tempt even the cautious. Rough sailors pressed in, weighing the risks. By dawn, hands had been shaken, crews expanded, and destinies altered. Many a voyage, glorious or doomed, began beneath the smoky rafters of a tavern. And then there were the betrayals. A man nursing a mug in shadow might be plotting mutiny, whispering to a shipmate about the captain's cruelty, promising better fortune if they turn. Another might sell his comrades secrets for coin or safety, sliding information across the table to a governor's spy. Some betrayals were sealed with a quiet nod, others with a dagger in the back before the night was done. Women, too, played their part in these dealings. Barmaids overheard more than most, carrying mugs between tables and catching fragments of plans. Some sold what they learned to the highest bidder. Others warned favored patrons of danger. Their ears were as valuable as any spies, and their loyalty was often the most precarious treasure in the room.
The tavern itself was complicit. Its keepers knew that their walls sheltered more than drink. They turned blind eyes for a price, letting smugglers stash goods in cellars, letting captains meet in upstairs rooms, letting deals unfold so long as the coin kept flowing. Some taverns thrived more on this trade than on rum itself, their reputations built not on music, but on secrets. And yet, for all its shadows, the tavern was dangerous ground. Men who dealt there knew the risks. A wrong word might be overheard, a loose tongue might slip, a bargain might collapse into violence. Trust was rare, betrayal common, which made the tavern both a cradle of opportunity and a pit of ruin. Listen closely, and you can almost hear it beneath the roar. The scrape of chairs pulled closer, the shuffle of coins pushed across wood, the muttered oaths sealed with a drink. A pirate might enter the tavern as a free man and leave bound to a voyage, to a crew, to a fate he had not imagined when the night began.
For the tavern was more than a place of drink. It was the forge where pirate life was hammered out in heat and noise. Every raid, every betrayal, every brotherhood and feud found its roots here, in shadows deeper than the sea itself. The chaos of the main room was the perfect veil for the subtler chaos of deals, and both were bound together in the life of a pirate. So when you picture the tavern, do not stop at the music and the fights. Look closer, to the corners where lantern light fades. There, pirates plot their futures over mugs of grog. There, gold changes hands, maps are marked, and oaths are sworn. There, Lives are bought and sold as surely as bottles of rum. And in the morning, when the smoke clears and the floor is swept, the echoes remain, not only of laughter and song, but of whispered deals that may decide who sails, who triumphs, and who swings from the gallows. If the pirate tavern at night was a storm, wild, roaring, alive, then the morning after was the wreckage left behind when the tempest passed. The sun, creeping through shutters, revealed not laughter and music, but the heavy silence of exhaustion, broken only by snores and groans. To survive the tavern's chaos was one thing. To wake in its aftermath was another ordeal entirely. The first thing you noticed was the smell. Gone was the sweet promise of roasted meat or spiced rum. In its place lingered the sour stench of spilled drink, sweat, and smoke ground into every beam and board. Broken mugs and bottles lay like shipwrecked timbers across the floor, their contents staining the sawdust black. The air was thick and heavy, a reminder of how many lungs had breathed and shouted within those walls just hours before. Then came the bodies. Pirates slumped across tables, faces buried in arms sticky with rum. Others sprawled on the floor, limbs akimbo, as though the tavern itself had claimed them. Some snored so loudly they seemed to rattle the rafters. Others muttered in dreams, chasing ghosts of dice games and fights still raging in their minds. More than a few bore bruises and cuts, souvenirs of the previous night's brawls. A broken nose here, a blackened eye there, even the occasional bloodied shirt where a knife had kissed too close. In corners, the unlucky nursed hangovers that felt like cannon fire. Heads clutched in hands, eyes squeezed shut against the faintest light. They begged silently for silence, for water, for mercy. A tavern hangover was no small thing. Pirates drank hard, and rum left its mark. Their throats burned, their stomachs churned, and their skulls throbbed like drums. Yet most knew it was only a matter of hours before they would lift a mug again. Such was the cycle. The tavern itself bore scars of the night. Chairs lay splintered, tables overturned, stains spreading like battle wounds. Knife gashes scarred the wood, pistols left black marks of powder burns, and in some dark corners, dried blood hinted at quarrels that had gone too far. The tavern keeper and his crew shuffled through the wreckage with weary efficiency, sweeping sawdust, righting furniture, dragging the unconscious into piles. This too was routine. They had seen nights like this before, and they would see them again. Outside, the town stirred. Sunlight revealed pirates staggering into streets, squinting at the brightness, clutching bottles they hadn't yet finished. Some slumped in alleys, others wandered toward ships, still singing off-key. Children darted past, snatching up dropped coins or trinkets before anyone noticed. Dogs nosed at the tavern's refuse, claiming scraps from abandoned plates. Life resumed, indifferent to the ruin of the night before. But mornings after weren't just about sickness and mess. They carried consequences. Wages made in drunken haze now came due. A man who promised half his pay on a dice throw might wake to find himself penniless. Debts were called in, favors demanded. Some pirates found themselves pressed into crews they barely remembered agreeing to join. Others discovered enemies made, insults remembered, grudges born in the haze of drink. And then there were the dead. Not every brawl ended with laughter and bruises. Sometimes a knife struck true, sometimes a pistol fired despite the danger. The unlucky were carried out at dawn, their bodies left in the street until claimed or buried. For pirates, death was as common as drink, and the tavern was simply another stage where fate chose its victims. The women of the tavern moved through the wreckage with practiced eyes. They counted coins, checked pockets, and sorted truth from promises. Some offered water or bread to the most wretched, their kindness born less of pity than of profit. A man grateful for help today might return with coin tomorrow. Others simply swept past, used to the sight of men broken by their own excess. Yet, for all the ruin, there was also a strange peace to the morning. The music was gone, the fights ended, the laughter faded, but in its place came stillness. Pirates lay quiet, their fury spent, their masks of bravado slipped away. For a few hours, they looked less like legends of the sea and more like what they truly were: weary men, fragile, fleeting, caught between survival and ruin. The tavern would wake again with nightfall. New barrels rolled in, new food cooked, new songs waiting on fiddlers' strings. But for now, it was a place of rest, a breath between storms, a reminder that for all the chaos and violence, pirates were still human, and humanity needed to sleep to recover, to face the next day's toil. The morning after in a pirate tavern was not just a scene of wreckage. It was the true reflection of pirate life. Fleeting joy, heavy cost, and the endless cycle of rise and fall. For every night of song came a morning of silence. For every toast to freedom came a debt unpaid. And for every pirate who raised a mug in triumph came another who woke to find himself ruined. When you imagine the tavern, do not stop at the laughter and the music. Picture, too, the morning light slanting across broken bottles and stained boards, the groans of hungover men, the quiet sweep of the keeper's broom. That was the truth of the pirate tavern, glorious by night, ruinous by dawn, a place where life was lived fast, burned bright, and left ashes in the morning sun. And so, the pirate tavern fades into silence, its laughter, its brawls, and its whispered secrets drifting into memory. If you've enjoyed this journey into the smoky halls of pirate life, I invite you to join me again for more tales of the sea. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, may your nights be calmer than a pirate's, and your dreams filled with adventure.